Hello everyone and welcome to the Pyrite Town RNG guide. In this video I'll show you how to RNG all of the pirate Pokemon with the exception of Yanma. This guide will assume you have calibrated your timer offset to hit your blinks reliably, as that is very crucial for doing what I'm about to show you in this video. And because of that, I recommend doing these either post-game or on the second run of the game, or if you're really desperate for Furt and Quillfish, you could rush through the game until you reach Dunsparce, find out your time offset and then restart the save. My personal recommendation, however, is to leave the square for the post-game, so you have an overall easier time by having access to the Master Ball, and so you'll be able to catch them in a post-game exclusive Pokeball, like for example a Luxury Ball or a Dive Ball if you so desire. But before I show you how to RNG the pirate Pokemon, I'll give a brief rundown on how it works so the preparations we are about to do make more sense. So, let's start by talking about what causes advances in the RNG. In Pyrite Town there are two things that cause advances. One of them is the fence and the other the NPCs. The smoke released by the fence causes the RNG to advance, however these advances are predictable. It becomes somewhat messy when we introduce the NPCs to the equation. Each time they move they cause the RNG to advance, however the real problem doesn't reside in them moving but the collision, which is very hard to simulate, so whenever they hit a wall they throw things out of whack. Now, if we were to get rid of the NPCs however, Pyrite would be the very same as Meditite and Raikou. So how do we take care of the NPCs? Well, we will solve them like I solve most problems in life, by straight up ignoring them. Well, you see, these NPCs run on an interval of somewhere between 2 and 8 seconds to decide when they will start moving again, as can be seen in the footage shown on screen. So how do we use this to our advantage? Well, from the outside we're not able to do anything, however we are able to manipulate these intervals when starting from inside one of the buildings so that at least the NPCs will move on exit for, realistically speaking, around 6.5 to 7.3 seconds, making it like the NPCs don't exist within this small time frame. You might think however that 6.5 seconds is way too little time to do anything, but I can assure you that it's plenty for most of them, so let me show you a quick example. For this example, my current seat is shown on the top left, with our minimum interval being the old man with around 6.5 seconds. And even though it states that you only have 6.5 seconds, in reality you have a bit more time than that. These intervals don't start the moment you exit the building, but a bit later. So let me show you real quickly how that looks and when it will start when I exit the windmill. As you can see, we already covered quite a bit of ground before the intervals start to count down. From the moment you are able to move, you have about roughly half a second of wiggle room to run towards the trainer of your choice. Also, the moment you exit the building, the NPCs will move a bit, but we don't have to worry about their advances because the moment we arrive at any of the trainers, that will have already been resolved. The moment we open the menu, you might notice two things. 1. The NPC intervals are paused, and 2. The seat keeps advancing because of the fence as is shown on the top left. The moment we open the party menu however, those are paused as well. From here we will do most of our blink stuff amongst other things, but we will get into that a bit later as I just want to show you what happens backstage. Once we press B and go back to the main menu, you will see that the RNG will start to advance again. Most of the timer will be spent waiting here to minimize the amount of time the intervals get to count down. But just to show we have enough time, for this example I'm just going to spam through the dialogue to show you the remaining time we had left once we enter the battle. And as you can see, we have around 3 seconds remaining, giving us plenty of time to work with. Of course, the remaining time will be different depending on how far the NPC is, but for my testing every single one should be fine with one exception, which I will talk about in a bit. So now I gave you a basic rundown on how it works, let's get into the preparation of things. Make sure you do these because otherwise you might potentially mess up when doing the actual RNG manip a bit later. Step 1. Movement practice. Since we're working within a small time frame, you'll need to practice running efficiently towards the NPC you want to battle. Take a speedrunner's approach, optimize your path and minimize unnecessary movements. Step 2. Timer setup. For this guide I'll be using EonTimer, but you can also use CC Timer in the same way. Open up EonTimer and go to settings. Set the custom frame rate to 16.68 and if you're using CC Timer or any other timer, set it to 59.94 Hz. Now navigate to the custom tab and set up a 2-stage timer. Make sure both stages have their units set to advances. And now we got that out of the way, what we will be focusing on here is the second stage of the timer. For now you can just put a low number of advances, like for example 500 in the first stage of the timer, as we're just going to test something real quick. What we want to find out for the second stage of the timer is how long does it take for you to get to the final text box when exiting the menu, with just enough time to press A on the final text box. This will help us with being more precise, but will also help us with limiting the time the NPC intervals get to count down. I will give a list of recommended timers you can start out with for each trainer, which I'll show on screen. However, this will also bring us to our first set of version differences, the text speed. The text speed will be different depending on the region of your game, with NTSAU and PAL being the same and the Japanese version being way faster. It is so much faster that in fact in a speedrun you'll save around 6 minutes when playing on the Japanese version, just because of the text speed alone. And that brings us to the exception I mentioned before, Noctowl. On NTSAU and PAL it borders on the impossible side of things, but from my testing it is technically possible with a high minimum interval of at least 7.2, and even then it's a bit dodgy, so a fair warning on that one. With that being said, let me show you how big the difference between English and Japanese is by using Noctowl as an example. As you can see, the difference is around 3 seconds, which is a massive deal when the NPC is already that far away, especially so when we are working with such short time frames. So if you have the means, I'd suggest doing Noctowl on the Japanese version of the game. But now you are aware of how everything works and the preparations, let's get into the RNG process itself, starting with the first part, the intervals. For the NPC initialization process, I will be using Word for my example. This is mainly so I can show you some extra things regarding the NPCs. So first of all, like usual, open up CoPilot and start out by finding your initial seed. Then run towards the building closest to your target. I personally don't tend to reblink just yet, because at most the RNG would have advanced around 17 to 20k. So if I were to make a rough timer to close in, I have to remove just about a second. Now we go back to CoPilot and copy our initial seed. Once we have that, we navigate to the newest tab that has been added in the latest update, the NPC Initialization tab. Paste your seed in the top left and set the location to the place from where you will exit. For the minimum interval section, set it to whatever you will need for your target. Just be warned that anything above 7.0 is very rare, so it is very likely you won't find one higher than that close by. But luckily, as I mentioned before, 6.5 is enough for most. But for some that are farther away on NTCU and PAL, you could up it a bit for a higher sense of security if you so desire. Once you have your location and minimum interval set, press search, and if you don't find anything in the 250k range, of course up it until you do. Now we copy both the initial seed and the target seed for the intervals we want to go for, and proceed to the miscellaneous tab to make a rough timer to close in on it. Then put your initial seed in the current seed box and the target seed you want to go for in the target seed box. Now select what you will be using to advance to your target and press calculate. Now this will show you how long it will take to advance to your target in its entirety, however we don't want to do that as we will most likely overshoot this way. So instead we will copy the distance in advances between the two seeds and bring it to the advances box in the wait time section. Then in the remaining advances box we put the amount of advances you'd want as a buffer and then press calculate. I personally tend to do around 30 to 40k for my first initial timer, but of course everyone has their own preference. Now we advance to our target using a shadow Pokemon and then we blink to find out our new current seed. Then copy your current seed and go back to the miscellaneous tools. Replace your old current seed with the new one and press calculate. When it shows that you're within the 30 to 50k range, I personally don't tend to use a timer anymore. At that point I just slowly advance by going in and out of the summary a few times until I am below the 20k range. And once you're within the 20k range, we go and grab our current seed and go back to the NPC Initialization tab. Just make sure you don't remove all your blink inputs, otherwise you have to reblink once more. Now we put our current seed in the top left and toggle consider blinks on, and then press calculate. Now you can select the one with the least amount of snack list and press open timer. You should already know this part, so now wait out the timer and leave the summary on the final beat. Once you have left the summary, the only thing left to do are the snack list. So do your snack list, and if you have done everything correctly, you should be on your target seed. Now you can walk up to the trainer as practiced before and immediately open the menu when right in front of it. At this point you are basically done and can go to the next part, but there are still few things I want to mention. By looking at the direction the NPCs are facing, you are able to confirm whether you are on the right seed for your intervals. So compare the arrows in CoPilot to the way the NPCs are facing to check whether that is the case. And the final thing I want to mention in regards to the NPC initialization process is the second and last regional difference. On PAL, there's a small chance for this part to go wrong no matter what you do. If you have a PAL profile selected, you will see another value pop up below the location box that goes from 1 to 5. And once you exit one of the buildings, the game will look at one of these counters to decide on a set of intervals. On PAL 60Hz, counters 2 to 5 will offer the same NPC intervals. However, counter 1 will produce a completely different set of intervals, making it so there's a small chance for the game to pick counter 1 and ruin your manip. On 50Hz, the chances are even worse, so make sure to always do this on 60Hz. Again, I do have to emphasize there's no way for us to control these values, so if it happens to fail, the only thing you can do is just try again. But I do have to mention that there's one exception, as there is no chance of it failing when going for Quillfish on Paul. With that being said, we can now go on to the timer part of the RNG, which I won't be continuing on through as I already got it on this file. So for that, I will switch over to Quagsire. The first thing we will be doing is a calibration run, and to make it as quick and painless as possible, we will be going for a random target close by. Also, calibrating on a random target will work for specific targets, so don't worry about that. So we first start off by blinking to find your current seed, and then we copy it. Then we go to the target Pokemon tab and paste it in as we're going into it right away. Make sure consider blink is turned on, and as for the filters, I wouldn't touch the default timer duration settings as those are already fine as is to filter out enough results. Well, as long as we set the shiny drop-down box to star square. Press calculate and you'll probably have a lot of results pop up that are close by. If that isn't the case, just look at the summary of a shadow Pokemon for a bit and try again until you do. As you can see on the screen, there are a lot of results that will lead to the same spread. All the seeds in the seed after blink column are the ones to make the target hittable by using a timer. So now pick one of the results and press open timer to see how much time you have remaining on that result. Ideally, we want to have something that is within a 1 to 5 minute range, because we don't want to wait too long as this is just a calibration run. If all the results are over the 10-minute range, I'd suggest just looking at the shadow Pokemon for a bit until you have some results that are close by. Once you have settled on a target, we can already start preparing for when the blink timer is finished. Of course, you can do this after the timer is done as well, but personally I like to do it while waiting when I see I have plenty of time left. So copy the seed you will end up on and paste it into the top left so we can look up what we hit once we capture it. Now copy the amount of frames and go to your timer. Paste the frames into the advances box of the first timer, and now we're all set for when the blink timer is finished. Now we just have to wait for the blink timer to finish and hit our blink to proceed with the next step. So I'll do a quick little time lapse to speed things up. Once you are out of the summary, the only thing left to do is to start the timer at the same time you leave the party menu. At the end of the first part of the timer, you will enter the overworld and rush to the final text box, then at the end of the second part of the timer, you will initiate the fight. Now that you're in the fight, capture the Pokemon and then go to the summary so we can look up what we hit. Then in CoPilot, turn consider blinks off and then set it to find by stats. Then we just want to put the stats of what we got into the filters and then press calculate. If you don't get any results, then most likely you missed your blink on either the NPC part or the timer part and will have to repeat the entire process once more. Now bring out your timer and copy and paste the frames of the result you got into the hitbox and press update. With this you have a calibration that should work with any target, however there is still the possibility of it being a false positive, so we will do a quick test run to see if it works as intended. Just repeat everything I've shown you so far and now do a test run with this calibration. Look up what you hit, and if you either hit a shiny or are within the 1 to 3 range, you pretty much succeeded. But if you're off by anything higher than that, like for example 15 frames, then either you failed this attempt or the previous attempt by missing your blinks or by being too slow with the NPCs. In my case, I was off by 1, so I just kept this calibration, and on my very next attempt I actually got a shiny Quagsire. With this you know everything you need to know and are ready to continue doing attempts or go for your specific spread. I won't be showing myself going for a specific spread in this video, because frankly it is not any different to what I've shown you earlier. The only thing that would change is there being a giant wait time after you have manipulated the NPCs, as you would do most of the advances once you're in front of the trainer. So as long as you use the miscellaneous tools for your wait times, it should be fine. With that being said, these are all the essential things you need to know about Pyrite. I hope it was useful, more videos to come, and thank you for watching.